Do you remember everything that you studied for a course 5 years ago? Then what's the point of memorization anyway? Isn't the no memorization strategy for education a better way? What's up everybody, Sadia here. I'm a machine learning engineer doing Ph.D. in Canada, and on this channel I usually talk about scholarships, machine learning, and how to study more effectively. Here's a little bit of my education history. For the first 13 years of my life, I always stood first in my class. Always the first position, never the second, never the third, and yes, 13 years does include college, and it also includes 2 times being a board topper, which basically means I scored the highest grades in over 200,000 students. Not a joke. During my undergrad and masters, I still had a decent GPA. I wasn't at the top, but close enough. But now I am back, my friends. I'm doing my PhD, and right now I have a perfect 4.3 out of 4.3 GPA. Why it's 4.3 instead of 4? I will explain that at the end of the video, but the point is I am back in my element. I got 6 or 7 scholarships and awards in my PhD, and oh my god, my professor told me when he was hiring new students that hopefully we can have more students like you. What can be a bigger compliment than that? And let me tell you, I have never memorized anything. I got here in my life without memorizing for my studies. Not just in my PhD, but also throughout my life. For my undergrad, masters, before that, I don't memorize anything. Even if I tried, I couldn't because I have such a bad memory. Memorization doesn't work, and I'll give you 3 reasons why. The first reason is, in a real life scenario, you should be able to Google stuff. As an engineer, if you want to calculate something using the radius of Earth or speed of light or anything like that, you can just quickly Google it and then you can incorporate it into your work. Now, granted, some people do need to memorize things for their work. For example, if you're a doctor, you need to be able to recall off the top of your head what medicine is right in an emergency situation. But most of us are not doctors. As engineers, we don't need to memorize stuff. Whenever we are designing something, validating something, if we need certain information that we don't remember off the top of our head, we can always just Google it. We have the flexibility, the luxury of time and being able to Google stuff. The second reason memorization doesn't work, at least for me, is I don't remember meeting anyone who has a worse memory than I do. Or maybe I met them, but then I forgot. I don't remember anything. The flashcards, the spider charts, the million other memorization techniques, I've tried them all. And trust me, after a while, I forget everything I memorized. I tried to memorize things like dates and places and other things for essays and for history lessons, and trust me when I say this, after a couple of days, I forget all of them. Here's another reason memorization doesn't work. My 12th grade teacher said, you won't succeed in this system if you don't memorize stuff. The system is broken, the education system is made in a certain way that if you don't write your definitions word to word, you won't succeed in this system. And yet, I beat the system. Simply because I'm just so bad at memorizing stuff that I just couldn't memorize the definitions word for word. He said, give me the definition of acceleration. I gave a definition off the top of my head depending on my understanding of the acceleration, not the word for word definition that I studied in the book. And I still managed to succeed. In my 12th grade, I was a board topper. I scored the highest grades in a lot of students, and I did that without memorizing anything in a system that encourages memorization. So today I want to give you my 4 tips that I use in my personal life to study more effectively. They might work for you, they may not work for you. If you're already good at memorization, you don't have much use for them. But if you're someone who has difficulty memorizing things, I think this method is going to help you a lot. This helped me rank the highest at McGill. This helped me throughout my life whenever I needed to memorize things, but I couldn't. Tip number 1, and this is specifically for engineers. Engineering is all about logical conclusions. What's the easiest and most logical way to get from point A to point B? The most intuitive answers are usually the correct ones. Here's my second tip. While I don't try to memorize the numbers and facts and dates, I do try to memorize or at least understand the relationships between things. What's the difference between Fourier series and Fourier transform? Or what does proof of contraction actually mean for the Bellman equation? Once you understand things, you don't need to memorize them. Once you understand the relationships, you don't really need to memorize a lot of the things. For example, the way the proof works, or the beginning at the end and the end of the proof. If you understand the idea what the proof of contraction means for the Bellman equation, you would be able to do it without memorizing it. The third tip, and this is the one that I use all the time, visualize things, not just in your head, on paper. What does proof of contraction look like on a paper? What does a third, fourth, and fifth dimension look like on the paper? Try to visualize them. It doesn't have to be a very accurate representation of the phenomena. None of us can accurately visualize what's the fourth, fifth, and sixth dimension. It just has to be your idea of what it looks like. So whenever you're studying a complicated phenomena, a proof, a very difficult mathematical equation, try to visualize it in your head and then put it onto a paper. As soon as you put it on the paper, you will be able to remember it much better. And this is something I used a lot when I was taking some courses from McGill. The proof of contraction was really difficult for me for some reason, and the Bellman equation and the whole math around it was just so complicated for me that I always had difficulty remembering what goes where or what does it mean. So I always tried to visualize in my notes, what does contraction actually mean? What does it look like? So once you have an idea of what things look like, you will be able to remember them much more easily. Tip number 4, and this is somewhat related to my last tip of visualization. Try to find synonymous examples from real life. So for example, when I was studying Q learning, there is this concept of the environment and the agent interacts with the environment, gets some reward, and then in return, it keeps learning to become a better reinforcement learning agent. This is purely a complicated, difficult machine learning idea. And I was having some difficulty trying to understand what are the steps involved, what goes first, what goes second, what goes third. And in my head, even though I made some visualizations, I made some flowcharts, this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3, I was still having a lot of difficulty trying to remember it or trying to just etch it into my brain somehow. So here's what I did. I took a real life example. How would you train your dog? Or how to train your dragon? You would make them do certain actions. They would be taking some random actions, and if they do a certain action that should be rewarding, that you want them to do in future more, if they are spinning and you want them to do the spinning more in future, you would give them a treat. And then you will keep repeating the process. So in this example, I told myself in my head that, okay, the dog is the agent and me giving the reward, everything else that rewards the dog is the environment. So the agent keeps taking some random actions. So the first step would always be that the agent takes an action. Based on that action, as a result of that action, the environment either gives a positive reward, a negative reward, or a zero reward. And after that, the agent keeps repeating those actions until it learns something. So this is something that really helped me understand the Q learning, the reinforcement learning concepts, because I was able to relate them with a real life example. So try to relate whatever you're studying with a simple, easy to understand real life example, and it will really help you up your game in your studies. Because when you have easy to understand examples about your research, you don't have to really memorize anything. You don't have to memorize the steps. You don't have to remember the order in which things are happening. And this way, you yourself have a much better understanding of the work you're doing, and you will even be able to explain it to a 5-year-old or an 80-year-old person. So whatever you're studying, try to make it simple and easy enough so that you can explain it to someone who's not an expert in that subject, using real life examples, synonymous scenarios. So that will really help you up your game. And now, as promised, the 4.3 GPA scale. McGill originally doesn't use a 4.3 GPA scale. My Ph.D. is a program from a French institute where I cannot take my coursework from the French institute itself because I don't speak good enough French yet. You saw an example of that in a previous video when I was trying to say bonjour. But you can take in Quebec university courses from other universities. So I took my coursework from McGill, which originally uses a 4.0 GPA scale. But the way McGill courses are translated in this inter-university GPA translation system is that an A from McGill gets translated to 4.2 originally at McGill, but at my university it gets translated to 4.3. And this 4.3 GPA scale is the one that apparently takes the difficulty of the courses into account while calculating this GPA. So the GPA above 4, like the 4.3 GPA, is supposed to be a very, very good GPA. And don't worry if you don't have a 4.0 or 4.3 CGPA. You don't need it to succeed in life. I will link a video here that shows you how you can make a low GPA matter much less on all of your MS and PhD admission applications and scholarship applications. See you next time!